The Lawyer Who Rocks is brought to you by Hughes Media Law Group. You can visit HMLG at hmlglaw.com. Keep up with the podcast on social media at HMLG Law on all major platforms, and be sure to follow us there. Thank you for listening and enjoy this episode of The Lawyer Who Rocks. My name is Jolene Winther Hughes. I am a lawyer who rocks.
When it comes to having your back, there ain't nobody better. This you better believe. Jolene.
Over a decade ago, a group of women law firm founders met up for dinner, and I met my guest today, Alisa Brodkowitz. Very few women have founded law firms in this country, and even though all of our practices were very different, it has been such a great support system for us over the years. But what's really cool about Alisa is the fact that she's not only founded her own law firm, but she launched her own startup recently, making her so cool in my book. So please welcome the CEO of Lightening Law Technologies, Alisa Brodkowitz. Welcome.
Thank you, Jolene. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you because, when we first met, we were in this great group of women that had different law practices from tech and, of course, aviation law, which is what your practice has been based in. We don't just get to where we're at without going through some bumps in the road and ups and downs. So what brought you out to the Pacific Northwest?
Well, I thought I would just be here for a couple years for law school. I went to college in Montreal, loved Montreal, and thought that that would be my home eventually. But I wanted to be a lawyer, and I learned that if you go to law school in Quebec, that you learn the Napoleonic Civil Code. And that's kind of narrow. What if I wanted to ever practice somewhere else? How would that look? So I talked to different lawyers in Montreal and learned that there was a market for people who had American legal educations. So my idea was just to go to law school in the United States and then take all that learning back to Canada and make my life there. So I just chose Seattle because I got a scholarship.
Well, why did you want to become an attorney? Was that something you always dreamed about?
I wanted to become an attorney because I wanted to change the world. I wanted to make life better for people, and I saw that firsthand growing up in Vermont. So I grew up on a farm in Vermont, and although my parents were educated, I grew up with 100 sheep, horses, ducks, and the Northeast Kingdom is what they call that part of Vermont. So it's really economically depressed, really rural, really beautiful, and an interesting place for my parents who were from New York City and Philadelphia to land, but they were seeking that calm, that pristine, that quiet. And it led to a really interesting childhood. I think that I saw right away economic disparity on a level that a lot of people in America don't see. So for instance, the school that I went to, my public school, it at times was not up to code. So the school board could not meet inside the school, but the kids could go to school there every day. And then there were towns like Stowe, Vermont, where kids had access to computers and other resources. So the disparity was really, really affecting kids. And I saw it as a kid. So I happened to live next door to a lawyer, and he recently passed away, and he was a phenomenal attorney, and he had a cattle farm. He brought a lawsuit against the state of Vermont saying that the funding for the educational system was unconstitutional. And as a result of what Bob did, he changed the way that schools were funded. They became funded through one pot, and that all that tax money then was equally distributed between the towns and between the kids. So at a young age, I saw that as a lawyer, you can change the world, you can change a lot of people's lives, and that's why I went to law school.
Oh, that's so cool. Did you go into it thinking you would be in that type of law?
It's a really interesting, complicated type of law, incredibly challenging, never a dull moment, always learning constantly. If you ever wanted to understand the avionics system on a 757, become an aviation lawyer.
Well, I want to talk about law school. Did you find law school to be practical in your approach to like how you wanted to find your career?
What is fascinating about my travels through law school and finding a career is, in the end, the school gave me the last gift. So when I was in law school, here I was, wanted to go back to Montreal. I'm in Seattle, so I took a lot of international law courses. And one class I took was called Transnational Litigation. I would never have expected that it would be taught by an adjunct professor who'd worked on the TWA crash over Long Island, who would use that crash as a template and a paradigm to teach us all about conflicts of law, all about the different treaties. And at that moment, I was absolutely hooked. And I wanted to know, why did that plane crash? At the time, it was so new. There were even some people who had theorized it was shot down by a missile. I wanted to know why the person in 26C got a fraction of what the person in 26B got. It was gripping on a products liability, scientific level, solving a mystery, and also thinking about people from all around the world who get into a plane and what their experiences are in terms of how they are compensated and how their families are compensated. I was just totally gripped. So I said, I want to study aviation law.
Aviation law, when you say that, it sounds like plane crashes, but it's so much more than that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I started out, I was doing injuries on planes. So people who are hit in the head by luggage or in the knee by the beverage cart. Yeah, it's a lot more. Or people who are sickened by toxic fumes on airplanes because the air we breathe comes in through the engines and is contaminated with engine oil that contains an organophosphate. There are a lot of aspects to aviation law. Helicopter crashes, float plane crashes.
So, how did you transition from this internship you had into starting your own practice?
What happened first was I got an internship. I had experience. I was hired by a local boutique aviation law firm, Crutch Lindell, and it was there that I was able to work on some amazing cases. The Aaliyah plane crash case, Payne Stewart's plane crash. They gave me an education in how to do plane crashes. So I was there for 4 years, but I've always been the kind of person that loves to speak in public, loves to market. And as I started marketing, I saw that there wasn't going to be a place for me as a partner at that law firm. So I was ready to start my own law firm about 4 years out. And then I got scooped up by Strip Matter Kessler and worked there, developing my aviation practice. And a couple years later, I had my first child and needed more flexibility. So I started my own law firm. I was 7 years out of law school. I had been building an aviation practice, and all of my clients came with me. I was so worried that the people that I represented would want a bulldog to represent them and would think, I'm going to stay with this big, heavy hitting law firm. I'm not going to go with this solo new mom. And what I learned was exactly the opposite. I actually had a client who one day I said, I'm so surprised you came with me. I thought you'd want, like a bulldog. And she said, no, I want a seeing eye dog. And you're my seeing eye dog. As I realized I was that person, I could guide people through the process in a really appropriate, professional, intelligent, calm way. People like that. So I started my own practice in 2007, and I grew it for 10 years. And after 10 years, I was sort of gobbled up by a bigger firm. And I was at that firm for another couple years, but I really missed the entrepreneurism and I missed being the decider. And I looked around and realized that I'd had some big successes, but that I went to law school to change the world and I wasn't changing the world.
Right. I think that I'm going to challenge you a little on that because I think that when you are a female who decides to start your own law firm, you started changing the world then. may not be in the way that you thought, but there's so few women that actually go out and start their own law firms, as we all know, that shows other women that they can do it as well. So I admire you for doing that, especially when you're working on crashes and things like that with expert witnesses, and the amount of output you have to put in. The business model behind that kind of practice is tough, isn't it?
Yes, and that experience made me a really good businesswoman. I did things to track my cases and expenses and time input that I haven't seen at any other PI practice. And that really frustrated me when I went from my solo practice to this bigger law firm. I expected that there would be similar business procedures in place. And when there aren't, I don't think plaintiffs' personal injury attorneys think like business people. That can be very frustrating. So you're right. Here you are, you're a solo. You're going to take on a plane crash case. You're going to have to spend maybe $500,000 getting this case off the ground. You need to know whether to invest that money, whether the science is going to support the case, meaning is the metallurgy going to show that there was a plane crash? Is the toxicology for the pilot going to show that they didn't have anything in their system? All of these little bits of science that you are investing in to make your case a success. And then at the end, asking the jury to award damages in X amount to your client, ensuring that everyone profited from it. It's almost like each case is its own startup when you think about it.
Tell me how that experience of running your own firm and then seeing how that played out in the bigger firms inspired you to do your startup, and tell us what your startup is.
I would say that right now we are in an incredible place where we've just been going through a pilot project on online justice that none of us anticipated. So many attitudes have been changed about what we can do online. COVID thrust us into a pilot project on online justice, and now we can reap those benefits. So the thing that surprises me almost on a daily basis is I really think that contingent fee attorneys are in a particularly great place to innovate and to drive the innovation. And I wish there were more of them doing it, because contingent fee attorneys like myself, I spent my career protecting my time and finding ways to hack these real shortcuts into what I was doing. You can work on a case for years and not get paid on it. Or you can work on a case for years and finally get paid on it. But you're juggling 30 cases at once, you're not getting paid on an hourly basis. And how are you going to divide your time? So the time that I was trying to save as a contingent fee attorney, as a mom, as an international trial lawyer, I started innovating and didn't even really realize it. So in 2017, I started doing what I called paperless depositions, where I would send everybody a Dropbox link the day before the deposition and say, here are all the documents that I intend to use in the deposition. I'm not going to print them out. If you really want paper, you can print them out ahead of time. Otherwise, bring your laptop. The court reporter will bring an iPad for the witness and we'll proceed that way. And it was really little things that I started doing like that that led me to realize what the gaps were. And I decided I wanted to fill those gaps. So in 2019, I started Lightning Law Technologies to tackle remote testimony. Also, the other thing that really frustrated me about being a trial lawyer was how much of the truth the jury gets to hear. The jury does not get to hear the whole truth. The jury gets to hear what I would call the local truth. The people who are within 100 miles of the courthouse, the people you can afford to pay to walk the halls, to wait till they testify, and the witness in Australia who could make or break the case. If the other side won't agree to stream them in, then the judge won't agree to stream them in. And suddenly you have an incredible piece of testimony that doesn't come in. So watching that happen over the years, I felt like this has to change. I can Skype with somebody in the morning before court, and then their story will never be heard in that courthouse. Or people would come to me with cases and I would look at where the plane crash happened, where the evidence was, and say, this is too expensive. You have a very valid case, but I can't try it. So a lot of those frustrations led me to start Lightning Law Technologies, to start tackling remote testimony. My initial thought was this: if we can be the gold standard in remote depositions, integrating video with documents and the way attorneys use documents, then we can get into the courts. And then we can change the definition of jurisdiction. I think that lawyers are cautious, they're conservative, and the stereotypical lawyer, and I confess I have some of these elements myself, there's something about participating in this old profession that's built on years and years of decisions that is comforting and predictable and slow. But things are changing and attitudes have really changed over the years. And a part of starting Lightning Law Technologies was like, so much to learn. Understanding cap tables, understanding how VC funding works, understanding how market entry is so essential and important. But I do keep coming back to, hey, this feels really familiar, because it's just like every case I ever took where I'm investing time, I'm investing money, and there's no guarantee that we're going to make it a success. You work as hard as you can, you surround yourself with experts, you dig into the science and learn as much as you can about what is the backbone of what you're building or what you need to build. You understand, I would say the customers are kind of like the jury. Certainly pitching feels like arguments in front of a judge.
You're well prepared to be a tech entrepreneur.
Well, I really love it. I've always really used technology to try to find shortcuts and ways to do things faster and better in my practice, whether, it's marketing or the actual work. When I started Brodkowitz Law, I started paying, at the time it was a ton of money, $7,000 a month to this blog where I could have my own page on the blog and enough lawyers subscribed to it that it was very high up in the Google ratings. So people would find what you were saying quickly. I was interviewed by a newspaper because I was participating in this lawyer's blog. And I soon realized, wait a minute, I could start my own blog. For 99 cents a year, I can get this domain name. And then I kept asking people who found me, what term did you use to search for me? And they said, injured on a flight. So I bought www.injuredonaflight.com in 2007, started my own blog every day, and that was the bread and butter for my practice for the first several years. I'm really excited to be in this space and to be able to use all the tools that I've been using. Like Law Technologies is tackling remote testimony, but also remote voir dire, remote jury trials, and remote online mediations. So we have a lot of pots boiling. And one of the reasons is because all of those fit together, integrate, and you can have them on the same system. And the way I see that is that we're creating a place for lawyers to do their work online and to be able to go from deposition to mediation to trial presentation, but also to create a marketplace for lawyers and legal vendors, and then to be B2C, where you can show the public work you're actually doing as a litigator, and then get clients that way through more transparency.
So you are changing the world.
It's an access to justice issue. We should all be able to go to on our smartphones. And the backlog in cases that we see in King County, for instance, it's nothing like India. India is apparently 327 years behind. They went through all of the cases that they have backlogged. But yeah, I want to change the world by making it easier for everyone to get justice online. I don't know if you saw, but Judge Kuhnauer wrote an op-ed yesterday in the Seattle Times saying that he does not want the Zoom trial to stay. He described a world in which he goes into the courtroom and experiences the solemnity and the gravitas of the wood paneled room, the bench, the bar, and wants to keep that, and says that that sort of majesty cannot be created online. He wants, in his article, he said we need to return to the Abraham Lincoln style of trials.
How do you then bridge that gap so that way you're not getting judges who will say, well, no, I don't want to take that kind of testimony, or no, I don't think that that's right?
The customers at first for us are actually mediators who are retired judges and attorneys. So our market entry, and I'm excited that we have 3 alphas that will come out in about 3 weeks, just to test with about 50 attorneys and 25 mediators or retired judges. Getting retired judges behind our product, I believe, will help change and influence the opinions of some current judges. But during COVID, we haven't had a choice. So you may prefer the courtroom and live testimony, but we can't deliver it because it's too dangerous. And attorneys will be able to decide between themselves, hey, I want an online trial, because if it's in the courtroom, someone's going to be wearing a mask anyway. And the jury will be sitting there and they'll be upset that they're in proximity to other people and having to be masked all day. So I think that attorneys will realize that they'll get better results online, but it's not going to be tomorrow that we're all doing these Zoom trials. It's going to be over the course of several years.
Well, one of the things that just occurred to me is that facial expressions, in some ways, like until we get to a world where everybody can be in courtrooms without masks, actually this is a preferred method, because so much of being in front of a jury is watching, say, a defendant or even the plaintiffs or the parties, I guess, and how they're reacting, you know. And there's a whole school when you're in a trial lawyer, right, and preparing your witnesses and preparing your people. But if you have masks over, that kind of takes away a lot of, I guess, the thing that in person is supposed to allow you to do, to really feel the energy or like see the person, right?
Yes, and what we're finding with online juries is that they're more diverse. More people can participate without having to worry about the cost of parking downtown or leaving their home. So we're seeing more diverse juries, and I think more engaged juries. You know, for years as trial lawyers, we've been talking about, hey, the jury doesn't have a long attention span. The jury's used to kind of watching like CSI. So make your trial snappier, make it more exciting, use more visuals and graphics, and really get people in. I think that now that we have online Zoom trials, attorneys are really taking that to heart. My firm is in a trial this week. I keep tuning in because that's the other beautiful thing. You can just, from your own home, you can tune in and watch jury trials all over the country. You can watch hearings, you can watch sentencings, you can watch YouTube justice. So I keep tuning in and watching this trial, and I'm so excited to see the attorneys at Schrader Goldmark really embracing technology and doing things like, for instance, when you have a PowerPoint, not having like a big PowerPoint with your face in the corner. Instead, we're doing, you know, it looks like we're newscasters with our PowerPoints next to ourselves. So yeah, I think the jury trial experience is changing and it's more engaging, it's faster, the evidence is being presented more like a TV show. If I were going to give a trial lawyer a piece of advice, I would say go to LA and hire somebody who's been laid off due to COVID that produces TV shows and have them produce your trials with you.
Totally. That's a great idea. But I also love the aspect of accessibility that you talked about, not just for jurors, but for, you know, to have experts and to have the right people. Does that help save on costs? Is that one of the cool things about what you're doing?
A ton. It's a huge game changer. And I'm sad to say that some defense attorneys fight against Zoom trials because they realize that plaintiffs can put on their cases a lot cheaper. Well, let me just give you an example. Let's say I'm going to be trying a case in King County in downtown Seattle. I've got to get experts flown in. I've got to hotel rooms for those experts. We have to put together all the trial technology that's going to be in the courtroom. I need to pay somebody to be in the courtroom with us, putting that technology on. We have to be thinking about getting witnesses lunches. We're feeding ourselves downtown every day. I mean, just all of these things add up. So online justice is faster, it's less expensive, it's more diverse. It's everything we want the justice system to be. It's bringing justice to you. It's not making you jump over all of these hurdles to get to court.
Well, what are the next steps for Lightning Law? Where are you at in the process? And is it rolled out yet?
Complicated systems take time to build, and what we are building is mission critical. So we're not building something for a Zoom birthday party where if it goes down, big deal. When you build for a deposition, it has to be bulletproof. When you build for a testimony or a hearing, it has to be bulletproof. This is your one shot. So we've been carefully building and building and building. And as sort of a compromise, we are releasing some features. The features we're releasing in alpha version are some features for attorneys to be able to manipulate documents online like they would normally. In-house, I'm calling it paper cut. So much like working with real paper with a witness, you have to worry, the only thing that you won't get is a paper cut. But you should be worried about getting a paper cut because it's so much like the way you're able to mark up, tab, and work with documents and show them to a witness. And then we're also releasing something for court reporters. Part of what we've been building for online testimony is answering the pain points for court reporters and trying to empower them, because now that depositions are remote and online, court reporters can become much more self-reliant and make more money. We're releasing a feature for court reporters, and we are releasing a alpha version within about 6 weeks that are tools for mediators. It's fascinating, but online mediation has really taken off. I don't see that changing. People love online mediation.
Well, I mean, how important as far as promoting equity in the law is it to make legal services more available and less expensive?
It's huge. I think we've given a lot of lip service to access to justice. All of us have given a lot of lip service to access to justice. What I saw happen with COVID was the playing field got leveled, right? Suddenly, no one could get to court. Like I couldn't get to court. I'm a lawyer, I can't get to court. The playing field is totally level. The courtroom doors, they're shut to everybody. So now what? And that feeling of not being able to get justice, not being able to get stuff done, that equalizer should motivate every attorney to make sure that that never happens again. Some people think that the pandemic is the first in a cycle of what we'll see over the next decades, that we'll have different flus from different parts of the world and we'll either be in a constant state of shutdown or open, who knows. I don't know if that's true or not, but I really believe that we're helping everyone, people who need access to justice most and people who need access to justice least, when we build a system for if there is another pandemic, we can shut all the courtroom doors again and have this place to do everything lawyers do in one system online.
Well, you know, from the day I met you so many years ago, I really always felt a very kindred spirit. I'm in awe of the fact that you are transforming such an archaic part of litigation into modern technology. It's really so cool. It makes you such a badass. What do you think makes you a badass?
My superpower is that when I work with people on the other side of the table, we form relationships no matter what. The first case I ever had against an attorney, he's one of my lifelong friends and mentors. So I've spent my career building relationships with defense attorneys, adjusters, other plaintiffs' attorneys, court reporters, and being able to now have this startup where I can get the advice at the moment's notice of a insurance adjuster who used to write me checks, or a defense attorney who I used to go head to head with in the courtroom. Those relationships have given so much perspective to Lightning Law. We are in the middle of pitching for funding, so I've been doing a lot of pitches lately. That's been a huge learning experience, but I'm amazed again and again at how those relationships are helping those pitches move forward.
Gosh, thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Lawyer Who Rocks. If you've enjoyed it and want to hear more from business badasses, make sure you hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. While you're at it, please give us a review. It really helps us grow the show. The Lawyer Who Rocks is produced by Sean Fox and HMLG. If you've got an idea for a podcast, you can find Sean online at sfpodcast.com. A big thank you to Aaron Jones for our theme music, to Jeff Gilbert at Hairball Media for our awesome artwork, and thanks to my entire team at HMLG. If you need a lawyer who rocks, find us at hmlglaw.com. On the next episode,
we told everybody. So that idea of, if you have an idea, don't tell anybody, someone's going to steal it. No one's going to steal the damn idea. It takes too long to launch a damn company. So just tell everybody.
This podcast has been brought to you by HMLG. If you need lawyers who rock, visit us on our website at hmlglaw.com, or be sure to follow us on social media at hmlglaw or at The Lawyer Who Rocks on all social media platforms. It's just fun.